Welcome, everybody. There's the recording. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's great to be here to talk about the Pioneer Park plan. I want to start with the priorities of Salt Lake City's public lands and how public lands has been elevated within the city. Public lands includes Salt Lake City parks, trails, urban forest, natural lands, and golf. So with the completion of the 2019 needs assessment and the increase in green space use during the pandemic, the criticality of our parks and public lands to community life and their support to numerous community activities and events, gatherings, and athletic events has become more important than ever. Salt Lake City residents value and frequently use their parks, natural lands, and trails. We know that having parks and natural lands close to home affects how residents feel about their quality of life. The public lands needs assessment also found that the downtown and central city neighborhoods have the fastest population growth rates and the lowest level of park service per resident. This part of downtown is identified in the 2019 Public Lands Needs Assessment as a priority to provide greater park service for the roughly 5,000 residents and 37,000 employees that are within walking distance of the park. These numbers continue to rise rapidly. The Reimagine Nature Comprehensive Master Plan was developed in the past year and is the first citywide public lands master plan in 29 years. Over 12,000 community members provided feedback. The plan reflects three core community values for public lands: equity, stewardship, and livability. The plan also identified sorry, my computer just went out for a second. The plan also identified some complex societal issues that involve our parks, including rapid growth, lower historic rates of investment in public lands, and conflicts around urban issues like homelessness. These increasing pressures on our public lands has also added public interest in our parks and natural lands and has placed a new emphasis on our public green spaces. With this growing interest, last year, the mayor and council elevated public lands from a group of divisions within public services to a new department to allow for a more robust planning arm to support the overall master plan vision. So why Pioneer Park and why now? Reimagine Nature identified the central community areas as deficit areas where people are more than a half-mile walk from a park or green space. Pioneer Park is the only community-sized park in downtown Salt Lake City, serving immediate downtown residents, neighbors across the city, and visitors from across the region as a green oasis downtown. Community dissatisfaction with the park continues to activate discussion about how it can be improved and made a community asset. Last summer's public engagement process showed that 51% of survey respondents were either somewhat or extremely dissatisfied with the current status of the park, while just 2% of the respondents said they were extremely satisfied and 23% somewhat satisfied. In 2019, the Salt Lake City Council approved a budget amendment to designate a $3.44 million investment in impact fee funding to Pioneer Park as a way to begin addressing this deficit in park service for downtown residents. This vision plan provides the opportunity to begin addressing these immediate needs for more recreation options in downtown right now. Salt Lake City Public Lands also continues to look for new park space downtown. However, it is challenging to find centrally located large parcels that can meet all these multiple needs and provide space for recreation that is needed downtown. I'd like to pass it over to Nancy Monteith, our senior landscape architect in the engineering division.
Nancy, you're muted. I still, I have a, Pioneer Park is a special place. It is Salt Lake City's first park, you know, and it's one of the only downtown parks, at least a park that's big enough to have a variety of recreational options. You know, it's been a gathering place since the Indigenous period, and it's also was the site of the Mormon Pioneer Fort. Since that time, it has continued to be a place of refuge, a green oasis in the urban downtown. The park has offered various recreation opportunities that respond to interests of the era. Over the past 150 years, the neighborhood has also gone through a number of transitions and is now seeing a resurgence of new urban residents. Although everyday use is increasing in the park, residents are still not satisfied with the current conditions. This 10-acre park is predominantly open lawn with large mature trees scattered throughout, which have in their own right a lot of value, but there's you know, older facilities and not enough choice for people to come and really activate the park on a daily basis. The 10-acre park has a multi-use field, tennis courts, playground, basketball court, and an off-leash dog park. Some of these were built in the mid-'80s and others in 2005, and currently there are no restrooms in the park. Recent public engagement has informed the goals for our process and for the park itself. And the park, Pioneer Park, should really be the heart of the city, a commons that connects people to our urban center. It needs to be a model for urban ecology, a green space that responds to our climate challenges. The park needs to balance both neighborhood and regional needs. It needs to be a park that supports the everyday activities and nearby residents and active lifestyles, while also being that signature park that hosts citywide events. Pioneer Park should be welcoming for everyone. It should be an inviting space for all abilities, incomes, age, genders, and cultures. It should be safe and well-maintained. We should incorporate cutting edge solutions to address common urban park conflicts, and that we also need to recognize that stewardship and ongoing care is needed. And lastly, it needs to be a lasting legacy, a place that expresses the layered history and provides value to the future generations of Salt Lake City. And now I want to turn the time over to our consultants design workshop, let them introduce themselves to you and share details of our plan. Thanks.
Hi there. Thanks for that. My name is Anna Laybourne, and I'm a designer and planner with Design Workshop, and joined as well on this call with Sue Choi. And we're going to take this time to describe the vision plan. It's really created to give direction for the long-term investments and changes to the park design to achieve the project principles that Nancy just listed. There's a 2-minute vision video on the website that briefly describes the highlights of this plan. It describes this tree-filled oasis in this urban setting with new features for recreation, gathering, and relaxing outdoors. To give more insight into the thinking of this plan, we'll start in this presentation by sharing the points of inspiration and new study findings that inform critical decisions. We'll talk about the framework for the design thinking and get into a little more detail about the physical features proposed in the vision plan, as well as other elements that support the overall experience for this park. The park brings together findings and inspiration from a variety of sources. It includes studying past improvements, previous public input, past studies of the park. A newly completed cultural landscape report for the park was reviewed in detail and it really studies the history of the site and provides recommendations for how to maintain the integrity and interpret the history of the site, such as maintaining it as an open green space and recognizing that it's been both a refuge open to everyone and a place for gathering and activity. In the past year, a site assessment and public input have been collected that are directing this concept. We also study the changes and opportunities in the downtown, understanding who lives, works, plays, and visits downtown Salt Lake City currently, and what to anticipate for planning for its future. We're also referencing contemporary best practices for urban park designs throughout the country. Smaller investments have been made over time to this park. Fairly recent additions include a multi-purpose field and lights in the center of the park. And before that, a perimeter walkway to support the market was added to this park. These efforts took a phased approach, but without a full vision for strategically solving for the varied challenges of this park. Much of the time, the park is underutilized and does not attract that many residents and workers who spend time in the space, although it's one of the only park spaces in the downtown. The playground, courts, volleyball, these are all over 20 years old, which is the expiration timeline for these sorts of features. Only a few park benches exist in entirety throughout the park, and there's a real limitation on how comfortable this is to spend a great amount of time. The farmers market hosted in the park on Saturday continues to be a popular attraction. However, shade, seating, and other comforts are important considerations to make for this a more enjoyable experience. From a park audit conducted by community members and key stakeholders such as maintenance staff, police, and surrounding property owners, and the survey we learned that the park is frequented by people exercising, taking a break in the shade of the trees, and taking their dogs out for walks. Although many of these current park features don't fully meet their needs either. So through 2021, we received over 3,000 responses from online and in-person engagements. The abundance of interest envisioned an improved park exceeding expectations, and people from all walks of life were enthusiastic ideas that were provided in this engagement. There was great public support for adding a pavilion, food and beverage stands, dining space, a restroom, lighting, water features, and replacing play and sports elements. While there is a whole selection of items to choose from to indicate people's interests, and we tested out ideas of the past and ones that have been brought forward, these are some of the top things that have emerged around active play, public spaces, and passive features in this engagement in 2021 that we're now reflecting on in the hybrid response to a concept plan. The plan is informed from evaluating the space provided for amenities and level investment in other contemporary urban parks throughout the country. It's not uncommon for historic park remodels to range in price of $60 to $70 per square foot. Remodel of Pioneer Park in this full vision plan and includes improvements for the surrounding streets and adding a transit stop. It's estimated to be far less than that at about $46 per square foot. However, it is a pretty considerable investment overall for this vision plan to be complete, which we imagine will happen over a period of time. So with that, I wanted to share some of the points of inspiration for this concept when it came to form giving and coming up with how things were laid out in the park. The inspiration for the design includes maintaining and addressing these views of the mountains, as well as recognizing the circulation to the park and the points to the crossroads that are at the heart of this park. The perimeter trail has stayed a key feature of the park, but with the corners of the park opening up, increasing views in and out of the park while providing small entry plazas. So Pioneer Park will open up to the north edge of the park, providing a new plaza space to better support events, social gathering, and host events right at that crossroads. The next one. A signature park pavilion will be an iconic feature of downtown. So imagine in the center space, a cafe, a stage, restrooms, kiosk for the Salt Lake City's new park rangers, all in one space. These are the type of amenities in downtown parks throughout the country proven to reduce safety concerns and promote civic life and gathering. The Source, an interactive mist feature, will anchor that plaza. We're describing this as a mist feature, not the splash pads or fountains you might see in other places, partly because it's an excellent tool for reducing the effects of a hot summer day of cooling folks, but also being mindful of Utah's arid climate. It can be used as a sculptural feature that with beautiful lights that will help brighten on cold winter nights as well. The multi-purpose field, the newest addition to Pioneer Park, will remain the focus of the southern portion of the park, and it can also be used for gathering for events and concerts in the park. It'll have an addition of sports courts moving to flank either side of it, replacing the really aged basketball court that's undersized, as well as adding pickleball courts. Downtown's only park will have a strong focus on its trees. The design preserves 85% of the existing tree count and adds roughly 90 trees to increase the current tree canopy by 20%. The new park will add enhanced pockets of native plants, especially along the garden walk. The park includes a series of garden experiences to connect experiences throughout. And this is one of the top things that we heard in the survey people really wanted time and time again, was that enhancement of that existing tree canopy that's there today. The newly planted vegetation will be ready for Salt Lake City's changing temperatures and drought, as well as improved ecological systems with pollinator plants introduced. I wanted to hit on a moment about the events and performance spaces being better supported in a space. We really recognize the importance of supporting the market and ensuring that it has additional features that enhance people's comfort when they come to the market, as well as how vendors occupy the space. So these blue dots are representing different tent locations equal to what's on the site today, but with some enhanced features such as with the pavilion to add additional support. So it includes a capacity for more than 300 tents to maintain that presence of the popular farmers market, as well as having different seating and experiences included. Now, I'm hitting mostly on design features within the park, but we certainly want to recognize that there is a whole other host of supportive efforts that are needed to make this an overall experience that is desirable. So that's why we've had such a number of meetings with those that are that might become partners for providing services or for partnerships for caring for the park over time, and strategizing about issues of safety, greater inclusion, design for dignity, all of those elements to ensure that this is a welcoming and safe space for all. Maintenance considerations have been taking place with a variety of conversations around its short-term and long-term care and what those costs will look like. And so this partnership with homeless service providers and others to provide support and vet design improvements has been one of those elements that has really, one thing that really differentiates this design from past improvements is that consideration of those current challenges within the park. Really, in conclusion, transforming Pioneer Park is to bring it up to a level of expectation of downtown parks throughout the country and expectations of the city's residents, really to become your downtown park. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nancy to talk about some of the next steps.
Great, thanks, Anna. So we're really, again, we're just so excited to share this idea and this holistic vision that's built on so much work that inform the priorities and the future planning of the whole city. So the next steps in this process, our survey will be open until February 18th. So please share that widely. We'd like to get as much exposure as possible. And then we'll review final feedback from the public at the end of this month. Final points of that feedback will be incorporated into the vision plan, and then we'll be prioritizing the improvements that go forward. So the vision plan, as Anna mentioned, is currently valued at around $20 million, and we have 3.4 million allocated right now. So one of the things that we're asking in our survey is help us prioritize the groups of amenities that we think make sense for implementing together. And after that, we'll be developing the design drawings, construction documents, and they'll take place throughout the rest of 2022. And then construction will begin starting in 2023. for that first phase improvements. And then we'll continue to look for ways to find funding for future phases. And then Kristen has a few more comments for us today.
Thanks, Nancy. Yeah, just to wrap up, I wanted to talk about some future opportunities for the park. Salt Lake City will continue to look for additional opportunities to fund improvements to Pioneer Park so that we can fully implement this vision plan. In regards to programming, we are pleased to partner with a variety of entities to program this park and any other park around the city. We're looking forward to being able to expand those opportunities as more amenities and features come online. You also may have heard about the Park Ranger program that has been in the news. We're hoping to start seeing rangers in our parks in this summer of 22. New job postings were advertised for supervisory and management roles of this new program. Just this week, we have, after that, we'll have 16 positions for new park rangers that will open once those supervisory positions are filled. And lastly, Salt Lake City continues to seek out opportunities to add additional parks and green spaces downtown. We know there's a need and we are looking. This is dependent on our funding and the market pricing. So with that, I will turn it over to Leah for the Q&A session.
Thanks, Kristen. We have not had any questions in the chat. So perhaps I will, there's a comment in the chat though, which is that Mike is very excited about the proposed upgrades and knowing that this likely needs to be done in phases, thinks it's important to focus on the things that have the biggest impact, like the Pavilion, Cafe, Ranger Station, and upgrading the sidewalks. So thanks, Mike, for that. I appreciate it. We can maybe just jump to kind of our hot topic questions, if that's okay, Sue. So probably the number one question we've heard is, why should we invest in Pioneer Park when we have so many needs across the city? And so I think that is something that we spoke about a little bit earlier in the presentation that Kristen spoke about. And I think perhaps, Kristen, you could kind of talk about how this park came to be a priority for public lands. Just one more time, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. The area around Pioneer Park within a 5-minute block is the fastest growing district in Salt Lake City. It includes a significant density of housing, most of which does not include outdoor green space. Most people live in condos or apartments and don't have backyards. So Pioneer Park serves as the backyard for downtown residents, which is drastically underserved. The current project budget was allocated using impact fees. That's important to note because impact fees are used for new service. Impact fees are assessed on new housing developments so the city can build new amenities to meet the needs of our growing community. And these funds are only used, like I said, for new and added services to the park.
Thank you. So how does this funding compare to other parks in our city?
Well, there's different funding mechanisms within Salt Lake City. A lot of funds come through the CIP process, which capital improvement program, and so does impact fees. Council decides which projects are funded. General funds can be used for any projects. So general funds can go towards deferred maintenance and improving existing amenities. So For example, if a playground needs to be replaced, that would have to come from general funds rather than from impact fees, because impact fees have to be for new service. So new service could be things like a pavilion that we don't already have in a park. Does that
Thank
answer?
you. Yeah, thank you. So Rick has his hand up, but there's a similar question in the chat as well. So the question in the chat is, what is the budget shortfall? So, and I know, and then Rick will ask your question as well. He had mentioned in the chat, just how are we addressing budget and phasing? So I don't know, Kristen, if that's you or Nancy.
I can take a stab. So right now, as I said, we have $3.4 million for this project, and budget estimates are quite a bit larger than that. So we'll continue to look for funding. This is Pioneer Park is really important, and not all of the features can be funded with impact fees, which is what we currently have. And so we would look to the general fund for additional funding, potentially bond funding would be another option for Pioneer Park.
Thank you. Nancy, did you want to add anything there?
I just wanted to say that we had a sub-consultant on the design team that did a pretty thorough cost analysis. And, you know, what you're looking at today, what was presented was represents about a $20 million investment. So just to answer the deficit, so we have 3.4 and the total cost would be 20 million. So about 16.5 million.
And just, I know I mentioned this earlier, Nancy, but just to add on to that, that 20 million was all in for even improvements around the street, transit stop. This is everything that we could imagine would need to happen in this physical space to make these improvements come to life. And so it is imagined as a full vision plan, not a phased approach in that 20 million.
And as you pointed out, Anna, that it is a fairly modest cost per square foot as compared to other parks of this type in other urban centers. So looking at those benchmarking, that really it gives a lot of insight into, you know, what it takes to put together a park that is a vital public place.
And that is one of the things that we are currently asking the public about now, is because we know we have this budget shortfall, what should we prioritize? Like Mike suggested, what are the things that we should prioritize with this first phase, and what should be implemented over time as funding allows? And that's partly what this survey is about, and this open house is about as well. So Rick, did we answer your question, or do you have something else that you wanted to add?
Leah, hold on, right? Just trying to get off this phone call. Sorry.
Okay, we'll come
Bad
back
timing.
to you. It's always the way.
Thank you very much.
No
And
problem.
I do have a couple of follow-up questions if that's okay, but thanks for putting this presentation on this evening. And I've enjoyed being a part of the process as a citizen and also as a representative of the Pioneer Park Coalition, who is very, very interested and remains very, very active out in the community in doing what it can to help this vision process be completed. So I just had a couple of questions, and then would like to make a comment to pass on to everyone. Kristen, thank you for giving us updates about phasing and opportunities. At this point, beyond the 3.2 or 4 million that's already allocated, is there another allocation that is expected in the line of funding that might be a year or two out, or is it still conceptualized in doing a bond or doing something else?
Well, thanks, Rick, for the question, and hello.
Hi.
Yeah, so it has been proposed as a community reinvestment bond by the mayor to add more funding to Pioneer Park. Council is still mulling that over and hasn't gotten back to that question if that's an opportunity for us or not. You know, we will continue to look towards our community partners to help us find different avenues for funds to implement this. It's Pioneer Park is a little bit tougher just because of the needed infrastructure and the deferred maintenance that is already existing there, and the fact that we can't use our impact fees for most of these projects.
Thank you. If the reinvestment bond gets some air underneath its wings, is that something that might happen in 2022? Is it 2023, or is that even known at this point?
It can happen fairly quickly once council approves it. So it's yeah, it's a fairly quick process, but it still has to be put through council, and they have to make that approval. But once that happens, my understanding is that process. I haven't done this previously, so I don't know, but I am thinking it's a matter of months rather than years.
And sorry to be so, having questions about this. Is there a number that's been assigned to that? Is there some general number that might work for, or is that still a part of the council discussion as well?
It's still part of the discussion. Yeah, we had put forward an additional $5 million for the reinvestment bond, but that hasn't been determined. As you know, that will be determined by council ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So Rick, I'm going to interject just for a second, because in the Q&A, there is a question about how downtown residents can help with the initiative. And so I would add that taking the survey, sharing your support for the vision plan or your comments related to the vision plan, sharing your comments that you'd like to see it funded in the survey, and also with your representative on council or in your district or with your community council. Any of those entities are great places to help share your support and show that you would like to see this as a priority. Anna?
Same goes for, there's a couple of comments about priorities that people would like to see, like around the plaza, or and so those elements, please fill in the survey. There is a question about your priorities of what you'd like seeing happen first, and share that with others as well. We'd love to get the insight through that survey that we'll be sharing as results of this input that will help us understand people's preferences for what happens first and where the funding might go in initial stages.
Leah, may I have a chance
go
to
ahead,
maybe just address one other question? I don't want to take up time, but I just want to get this out, because I'd like to just share information that comes from the efforts the Pioneer Park Coalition is engaged in right now. We have sponsors for a bill that is currently before the state legislature, asking the state for $15 million dedicated specifically to Pioneer Park. And perhaps you've heard about this. It is in the discussion phases. Today we've had 3 meetings. We met with the House Speaker yesterday. We met with Senate Appropriations today. And also we met yesterday with the Business and Capital Improvements Subcommittee. We are strongly lobbying as a coalition for the $15 million to be specific to Pioneer Park. In addition to that, we have shared, which I think they know, and which is something I would assume that the city would be sharing as well, the fact that the city has $3+ million already planned, that the visioning process is getting to its final completion, that there is energy and efforts to make this a possibility. We are doing everything we can to get that $50 million appropriated. In our visit with the House Speaker, today, we talked about the park probably needing $30 million, being in line probably with a little more than what we anticipate right now. And our commitment to work with stakeholders and local business and philanthropic organizations to do our part, to do what we can as a coalition to match as much as that 50 million as we can. So that is in the works. It's real. A bill has been filed. And I think this question that someone asked is, how can they get involved? Leah, I think you hit on it exactly. You all have state legislatures. You all belong to districts. Now is the time to contact who your legislative representative is. And if this is, if we can get $15 million in 2022 that we can spend immediately for this project, that helps us do, almost 5 times what we have already in the budget right now. So we support this project. We love it. We want to be a part of it, and do what you can do to encourage your legislative leaders and your council representatives as well to support this. Council member Valderramas, who happens to be in Venezuela right now, was on all 3 calls with us today as we visited with the Senate leadership. So there is energy and effort there too. So just wanted to share that. Thanks for doing this. We believe in the project and look forward to some really positive outcome from this.
That's amazing. We are so excited to hear that and look forward to coordinating with you. I'm sure I'm not trying to speak on behalf of the city, so maybe I should not talk and let Nancy talk about how that coordination moves forward.
Yeah, I think, if we could show a kind of shared approach that it's supporting this vision, I think it would go a long way, and we would welcome that collaboration. So
wonderful.
Good luck with this, Rick. We appreciate your involvement and interest and willingness to put this forward to the legislator. Thanks.
Thank you, Kristen.
So we'll just reiterate, I've put the link to the survey in the chat several times. That is open until the 18th. Please feel free to share it with your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, whomever you might like to participate in an activity at the park with. And then we can share that back with Rick and his group to help support potential opportunities for more funding here for this vision plan. I'm going to jump to some of the other questions now. So there was a question about comfort stations generally. So restrooms given priority. There has been historic conflict around restrooms previously in this park. Also things like hydration stations and other amenities included, given that we are sort of increasing the level of physical activity in the park. So Anna.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this one. Yes, not just hydration stations, that is definitely a part of this that we recognize is not in the park today to a great extent and is desirable. Those are the type of smaller features that we'll be working into more of the detailed design elements, things like bike racks and other furniture that will be later stages of design. We'll getting more refined and where those are located, what they look like, and how they'll take place. But they are certainly elements of human comfort that we know we need to address in this plan. Looking to co-locate some of those features, but the restroom is the one I'd really like to talk about for a moment, because we've had a lot of questions about how will this be safer in the future? How will this be a better restroom than what was there before? And if you visited the one in the past, it was located in a place that was kind of offset. And so there's also that thing about sight lines and access that were considerations where it was located, as well as its design. There's a lot of great findings and studies of how to create restrooms in urban settings that avoid some of the challenges about vandalism, people occupying them for too long of time, or just behaviors occurring in them that are undesirable. And so one of the ones we were studying that has had great success in other cities is this automated self-cleaning restroom. It's one we'll be looking at in future design details later to see if this is appropriate for the plaza space. But it's one that has all kinds of features, like it's programmed to have an expiration time frame where it no longer stays locked, has vandal-proof surfaces, and it has opportunity to, like this one. Was voted it was voted #1 restroom, public restroom in the United States this last year. I didn't know there was such a voting thing, but it was. It's in Colorado Springs in their urban park that is in old Colorado City. And they've had great success with this one of addressing some of the challenges that they had in this shared space of people having different needs and ensuring that they all get met. And they particularly rave about this particular design of including history about the park wrapped around its exterior.
Thanks, Anna. I'm just scanning through. We've got a few more. Is there a logical order to how things might be implemented from the plan?
Yeah, that is a good question. And it's one of those elements that, yes, the public input will be helpful for us in directing priorities, but also there'll be that logical order for how to not have disturbance or redoing things as we go along with the construction. We'll know more about that once we know the total budget that would be assigned to this first phase. And then that will help inform that order that would take place. So I don't have an answer for you today about what is the best order for this park. It will come from that combination of what people will most use near term in the future. What are going to be the most popular things that will bring more people out? What are the ones that will enhance greater care and maintenance of this park over time? And those that are help with the feasibility for construction. So those would be some of those considerations as we determine what is in that first phase.
And that's, again, what we're asking the public to weigh in on right now. We've tried to sort of group things together that would be implemented or more easily implemented as a unit.
Mm-hmm.
There is a question about who will employ the rangers, and Kristen did answer that. It is a new Salt Lake City program. They would be public lands employees. Do you want to add anything to that, Kristen?
Just that you can apply online today. We are looking for a park ranger manager and a supervisor right now. And we're looking for folks that have possibly security experience, experience in interpretive park education, and just parks and recreation in general.
And I think also that social element of understanding that interaction, which is something that, you know, the park maintenance workers, sometimes it's a challenge for them to know how to interact in that way with people who have different needs. So that's, I think it is an important part about saying they have a specialized approach for management and within parks that others in security may not have.
And Leah,
Yes.
can I address the question regarding the trees? That
Please do.
Mike was asking, the new trees around the Great Lawn have struggled since they were planted a few years ago. Can we commit to caring for existing trees and to protect the investment we've already made? Absolutely. So unfortunately, the trees that were planted along the Great Lawn, when they were planted by a contractor, they sat outside too long prior to being planted, and several of them still had their metal cages on them, which was not ideal for the trees, and many of them have died. And our urban forestry division has gone in and pulled out a lot of the dead ones and put new ones in. And urban forestry has committed to monitoring and overseeing the tree planting that goes into all of our parks more closely, and not to just rely on contractors and their practices for how they manage trees. So I anticipate that this will not occur in the future. I'm really hoping that that's not the case, and that our trees will be much more healthy. These were London plane trees that were planted around the Great Lawn, and generally they do quite well and grow very easily in this in the Utah environment. And so that was unfortunate, and we are making adjustments to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Thanks, Kristen. Anna, I know that the park planning process, trees and natural landscape were a really important aspect that we heard from the public as something that was really desirable. Do you want to talk a little bit about the focus that you put into that and how that's reflected in the vision?
Yeah, and I may need Sue to chime in on this one as well, as this was a key part that she was studying in it.
Yeah.
And I listed off some stats very quickly about the tree preservation that we're going to be looking at, and that is a really key element. When we looked at how to really organize this park and locate things, it was about looking at, especially around the perimeter, those historic trees that are doing so well and are beloved by people, how to retain those, as well as some of the larger trees throughout. We studied to see which ones were in good condition today with the urban forestry staff, and those that could potentially be removed because they're struggling a bit more or not the tree type that's most desirable. Now, when we talk about future plantings, we're also looking at creating some variedness in species and attractiveness for more of a draw to this park that changes throughout the season. So there's some elements that we're looking at that are a varied look at this. There's been a desire for a memorial grove on the site that we're also exploring. And so it really does seem that that tree coverage and the plant communities on the site are a key interest to folks, as well as their long-term maintenance and understanding drought conditions and how do we care for this site in consideration of different landscape needs that our climate might require that we adjust to over time as well. Sue, am I missing anything there you'd like to highlight about the planting plan?
No, you got that right. And if you remember the slide with the different response rates, like the shaded, it wasn't, it wasn't like a powered concert venue. It was the shaded lawn that was the most popular option. So we are definitely sensitive to and thinking about, how to introduce and preserve, how do you introduce more trees and preserve the trees that are successful on the site, like Anna said. And we are also thinking about that human experience, right? Like it's not just, it's not so much from this view, from the picture that's on the slide right now, you plot the tree and it's successful, but we're thinking about, like Anna said, what types of trees, how big will it grow, where it will be placed, will there be like smaller ones that feel much more, that I could kind of walk through instead of just sitting underneath the shade. So those are the things that we are really excited to look into as we go into the next design stage.
And so just as an overview, though, the vision plan as it stands now includes additional tree groves and also more densification of trees and plantings on the south end of the park near 4th South, which was intentional, I think, to sort of add that more oasis feel and a little bit of separation from traffic. Did I miss any of the other plant features or green features?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one of the things we really wanted to do is buffer the park from 400 South and 300 West and really enhance. So when you're in the park, you feel surrounded by that experience of being in nature.
Thank you. What about parking? That was a question here. How is parking? Does the vision plan address parking? Did we consider it?
Yeah, I'd say generally we're not looking to add a parking structure or something major to this site, but rather maintain the parking that does surround this the entire park. And we know there have been comments about there being a deficiency of parking throughout, but we don't want parking to overtake the need for people to have green space in the park. So our thought is that should be accommodated elsewhere, but we don't want to reduce the amount of parking that is available surrounding the park that's there today.
And a couple other things too is looking at where a transit stop could be incorporated into the park, and then also adding more multi-use bike lanes or bike lanes on the streets in the adjacent streets or nearby neighborhoods. So we can encourage all forms of access to the park. And, during twilight or farmers market, there is a steady stream of people biking to the park for that event. And they get to park their bike in the park. So I think we'll see more and more of that desire to get to our spaces in an alternative way.
You reminded me of something when you said that, Nancy, that the circulation to the park, we studied that as well. And some of the improvements that we're suggesting, but don't have total control over, are the mid-block crossings that could also help improve some circulation and access to the site, that connects a little bit better throughout. But thanks for mentioning that, with thinking about the transit stop in particular as an added feature that could be helpful to this park.
Yeah, and I will just add that during the additional meetings that the project team had, we also met with the Utah Department of Transportation and the Utah Transit Authority to talk about how the park interfaces with those state facilities and also future transit plans. So those are things like mid-block crossings, locations for bike racks, and the transit stop design. Those kinds of items come in the next phase once the vision is confirmed and sort of identified the next phase of implementation as well. I've got a couple that have come into me directly that I want to address. And this one is sort of the elephant in the room, so to speak, when we talk about Pioneer Park, which is it does not have a great reputation. It has a reputation of having illicit activities in and near the park. And so how does this vision plan address that historic conflict that we've seen with a variety of illicit activities and folks who are unsheltered? So Anna, I think I'll turn that to you first.
Yeah, great. I think it's very important to recognize that design can do some things to address that. And we have looked at that and studied it hard in this plan of how design can help influence reduction in criminal activity. Some of those things are like adding trees, surprisingly, is one of those things that has been shown through research to reduce crime levels in parks, as well as maintenance of parks can do that as well. But what we also want to acknowledge is there are a variety of other elements that are not necessarily physical design that help contribute to this. Throughout the country, people are trying out things and studying what the effects are of adding things like a activity cart that is this one in Atlanta, Georgia, is hosted by a gentleman who experienced homelessness, and his interface with folks helps him have a conversation. It helps address the perceptions of those experiencing homelessness in the parks and how they often are perceived as being unsafe in some way. And it helps bridge that gap between perceptions and reality about safety and create more of a conversation. As well as having volunteers in parks, that a presence in the park of having someone who is sort of a tenant in the space. Their presence alone drastically changes that relationship of how people feel comfortable in a space, as well as actual reduction in crime itself. So things like volunteers who are wearing the gear and you can identify in the space, or a park ranger. These are all elements that people found of having a not an overly militant or oppressive feeling in the park, but having one where it's connection to people. And so that approach of not being this overbearing surveillance piece, but more of a community connection and causing people to spend more time in the space is a key approach that is found in urban design elements that are successful. So that's really at the forefront of our planning process, and we're thinking in detail with others about how this could take place and how services are supported. So we mentioned the Ranger program, but also wanted to mention in the design concepts, things like the clear sight lines that are important for when you are having a presence of other people in the park, such as put on the screen here, how they can see the different elements, the safety around playground features in particular, and people feeling that it's a welcoming space. Digital lighting, We included the cafe space, not just because people said they would love to see it there, but that's also a way to add a presence in the park that is more throughout the day experience. Let's see, we also want to mention that just the presence of more people in the park lately, the dog walkers, sport leagues, play, other elements that have been changed in the park to add interest, as well as hosting events of different sizes that are some of those everyday activities, that in itself has led to a positive reduction in reports of illegal activities and police calls and incidences occurring. That we've seen evidence of the changes that were made in just the last few years having a positive impact. And so really increasing the programming elements in this park of hosting activities can help address that, as well as continuing to increase the sports and league play on the multi-purpose field.
Yeah, Anna, do you want to mention the movie night we had and the field day we had during the summer engagements? Or I could speak like quickly about that too.
Yeah, you know, two elements. One, we had a site audit and spoke with Salt Lake City's police department and park squad to understand the implications on this park of what was taking place and what we might need to address in the design or other programming elements that could be of assistance. And then we tested some things out, like we hosted a field day that included sports and activities taking place on the site, as well as an evening movie in the park. And that brought people out, they enjoyed the space. And, you know, when we think about reducing that perception of the historic challenges in the park, as well as allowing for coexistence, that's really the point here, is wanting to encourage that those that are experiencing homelessness do not feel excluded. This doesn't become a privatized park that pushes people out and doesn't allow them in to experience the space as well. But a space that really encourages that interaction in a way that is positive.
Thanks, Anna. The last question I can see, I think, Molly, let me know if I missed any, is Peggy brings up a great point, which is that there is a ton of new housing coming online. Apartment buildings are popping up daily. There are cranes everywhere. So her question is whether developers are involved or contributing funding in relation to their tenants. So I suspect that that's something related to impact fees, but I'm not a funding expert. So I'm going to defer that one to Kristen.
Sure. Thanks, Leah. Yeah, definitely developers are involved in the funding through impact fees. And although not everything can be funded in this project through impact fees, some things definitely can be. And so every time there is another door added to Salt Lake City, developers pay an impact fee based on whether it's a single family home or a multi-family home for each of those doors that they add. And that gets paid to the city. It goes to parks impact fees, and those fees are spent throughout the city on added new service. I think that Peggy may also be asking, you know, can we ask developers to do more? And maybe we can, and maybe we will need to. And we have not approached that at this time, but that's certainly something we always welcome developers to participate financially, and also, you know, just to provide their input from their project's perspective on our project. But we encourage and invite that input, as well as any funding that developers might be interested in providing to us.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions in the chat. If you do have any more questions, we'll just pause for a moment. I will go through my feed really quickly and just double check. Okay. Park maintenance is something that has come up before, and I don't know, we did touch on it a little bit, I think, across the different speaking points, but maybe Nancy, you could touch on the age of the amenities that are existing, and maybe Kristen, you could talk a little bit about sort of what Public Lands is already doing to maintain the site versus
Yeah.
how that might change with this vision plan.
Yeah, so the existing amenities that are currently on site are, 15 or more years old. So the bocce ball court and the dog park amenities were done with the perimeter pathway, the crushed stone and the concrete pathway, but that was done in 2006. And we tend to, for future planning of all of our parks sites, we 20 years is a typical time just for the aging of infrastructure and need for renewal. And then you look at things like the volleyball court, the tennis court, and the playground, and they were likely in, we don't have an exact date, but around 1985, those elements were, so that's almost 40 years. So they do, and I think, if you look at that image of the playground, it discourages use, the aged infrastructure. And there's certainly a lot more really exciting kind of play features that attract both youth and adults that we could explore as we move forward.
Yeah, and aging infrastructure kind of plagues public lands across the city. It's a difficult problem that takes a lot of money to fix. Certainly, it takes our public land staff quite a bit more time to maintain aging infrastructure. Sometimes they're doing Band-Aids or repairs to the irrigation system or playgrounds and courts and those kind of things. Right now, Public Lands spends about 80 hours per week at Pioneer Park. That's a couple staff per week that are at Pioneer Park. And the vision plan adds other staff to the park, and that could be programming staff is what the vision plan is thinking about, which improves the reach of our maintenance of our crews. And once you get more people activated in the park, the park feels more lively and becomes more welcoming. Maintenance is a huge issue for Pioneer Park, but we spend a lot of maintenance hours there to try to keep it clean and looking tidy. Our maintenance staff work from 6 a.m. In the summers, 7 in the winters, till 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And so after that time, oftentimes there's garbage left behind, and we don't get to it until the next morning. And so the maintenance is a big issue at this park, and our staff spends a lot of time cleaning up every morning to make sure the garbages are emptied and the park looks good.
Thank you. Anna, you could maybe talk a little bit about what you've seen as parks about this particular issue with maintenance and trash and refuse, and in other parks that are more activated. I think that's kind of the question a lot of folks who are not in the industry sort of question, right? More people seems like more trash, but how does that actually work in other examples of urban parks that you've seen?
Well, it's often with partnerships of when events and activities are held, those partners are on the hook for a lot of the cleanup. And that they play a role in that responsibility for caring for the space. It happens today with the market, right? That they play a role in its care and cleanup as well. So that's one of the elements in why more activities doesn't necessarily mean it's a greater challenge for the park's maintenance. It may mean that they're getting funded for much of that care in ways that they were not previously. It also is when there's a lot of study about building civic trust and how care and maintenance of spaces, we see the comments often where people say, why invest in the space? It's only going to get ruined again. That's not actually how things, how it actually takes place a lot of the time. That can be if you do small incremental steps for improvements, but usually when it's a space has really been cared for and enhanced, it has all these other supportive mechanisms. So we've mentioned for its long-term care, that oversight. It means that often the spaces do not get damaged the same way. Litter and graffiti doesn't occur at such a great rate. And it also means that that civic pride in a space is built. There's a lot of studies about the condition of playgrounds can really have a strong effect on people's feeling about civic pride and how they feel safe in a space or they feel welcome in a space. And those are some of the findings that then relate back to, and then does litter and waste increase on the site? It often doesn't, because people take it their own personal steps to care for it. When we did our site assessment, we certainly noticed that receptacles and ways of managing waste were done in a way that didn't really invite that response from the public. And certainly all those furnishings will be looked at for how do they better respond to how people interact with the space? Where do they need them? What is inviting for them to find a receptacle where they need it? So I think that might be getting at what you're hinting at, Leah.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's exactly right. We heard, during our engagement and some of our small group meetings, we heard a lot of debate about where you put restrooms in relation to the playground, right? And we heard from parents of small children about how the restrooms should be close to the playground. And then we heard from other folks who thought that a downtown urban park should not have restrooms close to the playground because there's children there, and there was concern about the types of behavior that could occur in a restroom. So there are, that's a common debate. I know Kat, one of our public lands planners, got to have a whole evening presentation discussion with Fairmont Park resident neighbors about the types of restrooms they would like to see. So these are things that I think we spend a lot of time as a project team considering that the public has opinions about, but may not necessarily consider in that sort of systematic way. So I appreciate you sharing that. Any other questions from the group? I'm just scrolling through. We do have a few more minutes, Sue, so I wondered if you wanted to go back to the slides that show the plan view and some of the exemplar images, because I think one of the things that's been really exciting for me, and that is part of the next phase, is sort of what that look and feel could be. And that's a place where we really like, that's the place that's sort of exciting, right? What do some of these plantings look like? What could some of these play features look like? So maybe Anna, you could just give us a quick overview of sort of how these features are laid out here.
Yeah, I'll take a little more time on that. There we go. I would mention in particular, we're showing some elements that bring in structure to this park, the overhang from the pavilion, for example. And I'm not showing a lot of, these are all character images. It is not the final design. Those will be developed later. They're all things to help inspire what could be. And we're showing inspirational images that show sort of an opening too. They're not in a closed space. You can see with the picture with the event pavilion there, we're really representing it as a view into this park, an open space. So that's one of the elements I wanted to point out, as well as with the plantings. I think we kind of walked through that. If there's more variety, more color, more places of interest within the park than are there today. But wanting to have this central space, that gathering at the pavilion, that won't be the final design that you see there, but that was just an inspirational piece about how it would fit into the space and incorporate all those different features, from restroom to a cafe to outdoor seating, in a way that is still open and connects to the multi-purpose field behind it. The misting feature can be incorporated in a variety of ways in the plaza spaces where we would desire for it to take place. that it would still allow for events to take place and wouldn't be occupying space that you'd otherwise want to have flexible. But really, all of that area can be programmed for events and activities in a flexible manner, adjusting to different needs. And right now, you see those big utility boxes that are providing power and outlets for the market. We want to embed those more within these spaces. Those really are needed elements of a modern park that is supporting market and other activities to take place, food trucks pulling in and other elements that happen in urban parks. And we'd like to see those more incorporated with the thought about the plaza and pavilion space. Any others that folks are curious about or would like to discuss more? Maybe so you can go to the next slide that had a few more items identified here. Seating and the way that we'll handle some of the furnishings in the site, those will come in the next stage of design that will get more refined with that, as well as art elements incorporated in. So that all will be developed through next stages with more input from the public, as well as experts on those topics to influence how those take place, what they look like. We're showing a range of features for playground and fitness. The character images are just to represent that things like swings that are really large really do capture all ages that we see, especially there's a study about how girls between the ages of about 12 and 21 find those swings to be the most captivating hangout spaces, and they're usually the ones that have a hard time finding a space in an urban park. Some of these other varieties are addressing the fitness and recreation desires for downtown of what isn't provided in other spaces and what would be desirable here. We saw a lot of interest in the basketball court being redone in a way that would be an attractive space that could hold full court use, and in the first round of engagement that we conducted. And we've been also hearing lately from folks that are interested in skateboarding features of desire for this park. So we'll likely be taking another look at that, making sure we're not missing some key groups that have interest in how they might recreate in the park.
One of my favorite parts about the public engagement on this process was that we did a booth at the farmers market, and we got to sit right on the northeast corners, kind of catch everybody as they were coming across the street. And we got to witness some really great arguments between people who really thought we should have basketball courts, or really thought that the space should be used for rugby, or the dog park needed more attention. And you could see, I mean, there were times, these are actually kind of lighter on the crowd front, but we had times where we were 25 or 30 people deep, with people putting stickers on the boards and kind of joking with each other about how much activity or how much green space and what types of things people wanted to do in the park. And that was really exciting. So I think we're in for a treat. And I just want to reflect Mike's comment too, that it's exciting to see the park reaching a new level of potential.
I think, Leah, that was really profound, of hearing from people who spend time in this park of what they'd like to see in the future, what would bring them there more often than just the market. I also really appreciate that you did engagement during different events, different times a day. Those who do come to the park regularly as their everyday activities, many of them talked about the dog park and its need for improvements. And those that we drew into the park that don't come there often today, that might have some other thoughts about what could be. I mean, you were able to capture things from visitors that were just wandering through and wondering what was going on at this booth, giving their thoughts as a visitor to Salt Lake City, as well as those that invitations to those that have lived in the downtown for a long time to come out and give their thoughts. So I think seeing the space itself and being in that spot gave us a different range of input than what we even got online.
Yeah, I think it was really important to make sure that we were there engaging with folks in the neighborhood as well. And I think Kat and Molly, who did a lot of our food truck night, which seemed to be more local residents, ended up having multiple conversations with neighborhood residents. And that it was nice to see. I think that's something that I didn't expect going into the project, was that it does have more of a neighborhood park feel now than it has previously, right? There are people walking dogs and jogging, and moms with strollers at different times of the day. And we put some tables and chairs out, and people are having lunch out there, you know, look at their sandwich from across the street and go enjoy the park, which I don't think is our first thought when we think about Pioneer Park. So it is changing as the neighborhood changes, and also as more, like Anna and Kristen both said, I think it is becoming people's backyard as more of those density projects come online. So we really want to reflect that as well. Well, I've put our last call for comments and questions in the chat. I have not seen any. I don't see any raised hands. So I guess what I'll do, Nancy, is just offer it up to you if there are any, you know, closing comments that you would like to make. And then Kristen, if there's any closing comments you would like to make.
You know, I think what I'd like to kind of respond to some of the recent comments that both of you made about how there's more and more of a neighborhood feel in the park. And that, you know, is a response to fairly modest improvements. And I think it just shows how investing in the park really does make a big difference. And we have, you know, a larger funding allocation than we've had since I can remember. But I think the potential to really make this park shine is here now, and to really build on this momentum. And, you know, we're hopeful that we can kind of keep going with that and use the excitement that we're getting from the community and help us get there. And I just want to thank everyone for participating tonight. It's really great to have this community conversation and hear your responses.
Yeah, I'll echo that as well. I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. You know, Pioneer Park is our downtown city's gem, and we don't have very many parks downtown. There's a couple pocket parks. Washington Square is a square, but this is really the opportunity for downtown to have a great celebratory park, and to activate it on a community level, as well as, you know, on a regional level, and bring people in from all over to downtown Salt Lake City. And it can be so much more than it is. And this vision plan, I feel like, will get us there and give us opportunities to invite those different kinds of programming, from large events to small events. And when I say large, I'm not talking about the twilight events. I'm talking about, you know, larger community events. So, you know, we might have small concerts, or some competitions in the park, or more craft fairs or festivals. So I'm really excited to see what can come out of Pioneer Park once these investments are made. I've been so impressed with the activation of the park, just with the field and more pathways. People are walking through there more often, and at night when the lights are on, and seeing folks out there participating in soccer or rugby or whatever it might be, it's really exciting. And I want to thank this team, the consultant team, Leah Hamero and Anna Labor and Molly Wireman, for all your work on this project. It's been a really great process to involve so many residents, over 12,000. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from the public. So I hope you will all take the survey and tell us what you think we should do first, and what's your priority, and how we're doing with this vision plan. So thanks, Leah. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. So I'll just add that I've probably pushed the survey link out in the chat more times than you'd have liked, but it's there. It's open until February 18th. You can also follow Public Lands on their social media feeds at SLC Public Lands. And you can go to the project website and watch the short overview video, you can see all of these slides. They're there already, or at least the vision plan slides are already on the website. We'll be sending out an email update kind of summarizing this meeting and also later the findings from that final survey. And then in the future, you'll be able to also gain project updates as the process moves into design and then eventually into implementation. So definitely follow us at SLC Public Lands or go to the website, sign up for email updates so that you can stay up to date. Feel free to contact your local representatives and your community councils to let them know your thoughts, particularly if you feel like you want to get involved in that funding discussion. That is an ongoing discussion here in our city. And with that, we will thank you and wish you a good evening.
Thank you.